it's always good meeting people who have suggestions, and together with my own kind of reflection on, well, for instance, this class, I decided to make one change, which is the motivation in the beginning is going to be shorter. The motivation, the meditation we do together. It's nice to do the meditation, of course, as a group, but there's only little time here, and there's so much material to cover, which is why today, what I would like to do today is just remind you that that's right in front of you, sentient beings are surrounding you, to set the stage basically for the prayer, and to ask you to generate the mind of enlightenment, bodhicitta, for the benefit of all sentient beings. So do whatever you can, and we do the prayer. That saves us some time. But also I understood that when I leave the questions towards the end, and we've gone through 2 hours yesterday even, people are too polite to ask questions because they may stop someone else from leaving. So I want to avoid that. So let's today start with questions. I'll take some questions if you have some, to be able to clarify some of your doubts, and then we'll just continue with the text as before. Okay, great. So let's do the motivation. Just a few seconds of breathing meditation to bring the mind to the present. And then think that Buddha Shakyamuni, who's inseparable, who's the same nature as your Lama or your Lamas, appears in the space in front of you. While you're surrounded by all mother sentient beings. And so, in front of the Buddha, generate a sincere aspiration to become fully enlightened for the benefit of each and every sentient being. So while holding on to the visualization as well as your mind of enlightenment, let's recite the prayer. Sangye Chodan Soge Chonamra Chancho Padu Dani Kapsuchi Dani Jinso Gipe Sonangi Yola Benche Sangye Jokashu Sangye Chodan Soge Chonamra Chancho Padu Dani Kapsuchi Dani Jinso Gipe Sonangi Yola Benche Sangye Jokashu Sangye Chodan Choki Chonamla Chancho Padu Dani Kapsuchi Dagi Jinso Gipe Sonamgi Chola Penche Sangye Jokashu. Great. Okay, so that was a short version, but it gives us some more time to discuss. Okay, any questions so far? Is there anyone who'd like to ask a question? You also have later a possibility before the end of class. Anyone? Yeah.
Question. Oui, you've talked about the three levels of dependent origination, and then you taught us that emptiness itself is empty.
Yes.
So does emptiness follow the three levels of dependent origination?
Okay, that's an important question. So, I said that emptiness itself lacks inherent existence. Does that mean that the three types of dependent arising, dependence on causes and conditions, dependence on parts, and dependence on imputation, can be applied to emptiness itself? Okay. First of all, is emptiness permanent or impermanent? What do you think? Permanent or impermanent? Does it change moment by moment?
I suppose because it lacks substance, so it doesn't change.
So it doesn't change moment by moment. You're absolutely right. It's not like the first moment of emptiness. It's the lack of inherent existence. It's not a fluent kind of a static thing that keeps changing. Very good. So is anything that is permanent, does it depend on causes and conditions? No. So the first question, you answered yourself. Okay. Then what about parts? I said before that parts don't just refer to parts in time or parts in space. Even characteristics, even certain characteristics, attributes if you like, they are also part of something. So can you think of an attribute or characteristic of emptiness? One attribute you already mentioned. It's permanent. So it's characteristic, it's attribute of being permanent. That's one of its, parts if you like. It's part of, the permanence of emptiness is a part of emptiness. Very good. Does it exist or not? Does emptiness exist? Yes. So what is the other attribute or the characteristic it has? It exists. Okay. So does it depend on these parts? Does emptiness depend on its permanence? Does it depend on its existence? If it doesn't depend on its existence, how could it exist? If it didn't depend on its existence, right? It depends on, it has to exist, so it depends on that characteristic. For something to exist, it depends on the characteristic of existence, right? So it's a little abstract. This is something, unless you studied philosophy more intensely, that may be a little bit new, but it all makes sense, doesn't it? So it's dependent on attributes, on characteristics that are not itself, but that are inseparable from it, and independence on which we can say it exists. Also, it is labeled. It depends, independence, for instance, when we say emptiness, as if there were this emptiness in general. Yes, we can in general talk about emptiness, but if you think about, for instance, table, like table in general, there's not like a general table somewhere in space floating around waiting to be discovered. As Piri said last time, it's just labeled. When we say table, on the basis of all these different examples of table, we label table in general. Okay. Now this is true for emptiness as well. There's not some kind of overarching emptiness. No, there's the emptiness of the chair, there's the emptiness of myself, the emptiness of you. So let's take the emptiness of this table. Does the emptiness, the lack of inherent existence of this table, what does it depend on? On the table, right? If you didn't have a table, you couldn't have the emptiness of the table. So on the basis so in relation or in dependence on this particular table, which is of one nature, which is also, you could say, a part of the emptiness of the table. So in dependence on that, we call it emptiness, right? So what is emptiness? It's just the non-findability, the lack of being able to find some inherent nature of this table. That's what we call emptiness. That's just labeled on the basis of the table, the fact that the mind can't find it, right? On the basis of different factors that are not the emptiness itself, so the mind searching for it and then eventually coming to the conclusion it's not there, independence on the table. On the basis or independence on that, we label emptiness. So it's also merely labeled, isn't it? It's also dependent on factors other than itself. Yeah. Good question, important question. So the first type of dependent arising does not apply to it simply because it's permanent.
Is it con?
Yes, sure. Another question? Yeah, go ahead, please. Oh, yes, and then afterwards. Yeah.
If there's no smallest atom, what about the most subtle wind, the loops?
If there's no partless particle, you mean like if there's no smallest particle that cannot be, what about the subtlest wind? Okay, well the subtlest wind is also made, for instance, it's a continuum in time, it occupies time, doesn't it? It exists for a certain time. So you could divide it into from the moment of that subtlest wind, a later moment of that subtlest wind, for instance. With parts, that's a little difficult, like, do you have spatial parts? No, I don't think so. Or I don't know, I mean, maybe like I don't know, I mean, what is this energy anyway? It's very difficult. So maybe it's enough to say it can be divided into, it's not partless because it has temporal parts at the very least. Yeah, so temporal parts.
So it's not atomically established?
Is it atomically established? Is it matter? So that's the definition of matter. I wonder, is it atomically established?
It is a form, right?
It is a form, but not every form is matter. Because a Buddha's body, for instance, is not. I would say because the subtlest wind is the substantial cause of a Buddha's body eventually, therefore I say it's not matter. It's form, it's physical, but not everything that is physical is atomically established. Yes, and then, do you have a question? Oh.
Why do we do the ultimate analysis of the house but not the feeling regarding the house? Because that's the one that
analysis
is
of the house, but not the ultimate analysis of the feeling
regarding the house.
The feeling regarding the house.
Because I'm thinking that if, let's say, I'm possessive of the house and cause afflictions, right? So I do ultimate analysis to overcome it. Then why do I analyze the house but I don't analyze
the feeling?
Yeah. And the other part is, why don't we analyze the emptiness of ignorance then?
Okay, you're right, it's true. I mean, it's not like I don't do here. So in general, we should do. We should actually analyze the emptiness of everything. But in the scope, as part of the scope of this class, it's very hard to explain feeling. First, we have to really understand what feeling is. So analyze the feeling. You're right, it should be done, actually. So my feeling of feeling protected, like my feeling of protectiveness, I mean, getting a sense that I get protected by the house. What is that feeling exactly? It's made of moments other than itself. So where's the exact feeling? But because we're not so, it's very difficult for us to describe the mind in terms of the parts of the mind other than the moments in time. It's a little harder to take it apart. But you're right, I mean, also the feeling, the attachment, etc. You see, it's important to generate mindfulness. With mindfulness actually being threefold. Mindfulness has three aspects. One is the aspect of introspection. for instance, being mindful of your own mind is you have introspection, you have attentiveness, and you have recollection, which is another word for mindfulness, so not to forget the object. Not forgetting the object, being aware, and being introspective. So with regard to your own mind, you have to look inwards, you have to pay attention, and make sure you don't forget the object of meditation. That's what is usually mindfulness meditation. And in that way, you get to know your own mind. You get to know how's it working? We don't usually pay attention to our own mind, we only pay attention to its objects. The object it perceives. So how does the mind work? How does it arise? Where does that feeling come from? How long does it last? Does it have a physiological, does it lead to a physiological response? Does it feel good? Does it feel bad? When we do that, first we get to know it better. And then we reflect upon the fact that it's also just labeled, it doesn't exist inherently. And feeling is difficult, especially if it's pain, for instance. With pain, it's like if there's a negative sense or there's a positive sense of pain, for instance. But what is very interesting, in modern science, there's a lot of research, there's some research on athletes, like I don't know, professional athletes who have to deal with pain. There's a huge important race, there's pain, they learn to ignore it, they learn to deal with that in a different way. So there are certain means and methods, and they're successful at that. So there's been some research on how that is actually done. How can you, through the power of your thoughts, can you actually deal with pain? I once read an article about this. Very interesting. So seeing it just as an experience that is also not inherently existent, right? So there exists of moments of probing and flooding, I don't know, what is it, pulling and there's a poking, etc. So different types of sensations that come together, which then we label as positive or negative. So you're right, that's absolutely something we should. With ignorance as well. That ignorance, I mean, in the Heart Sutra, it says there is no ignorance. There's no removal of ignorance. Actually, when we learn the Heart Sutra, we should meditate on all these different aspects. But I've given you examples here that are easier to take apart. There are different parts of a house. There's a roof, there are names to the different parts. So it's easier to discuss it. But she's right. We should also reflect on this. We should reflect on the emptiness of numbers and letters and different kinds of thoughts, feelings. Absolutely. Yeah. Does that answer your question? Right. Any more questions on this? If there aren't any, I'll continue. Okay. Now, as we spoke about the power of labeling, I want to bring this back again and again. I'll continue, of course, with the two truths, but you mustn't forget, we shouldn't forget emptiness, of course, and dependent arising, very important. So dependent arising, especially the last level. The fact that everything exists because of our thoughts. That our thoughts, so remember 2 days ago I spoke about every time there's the thought, I am this, I am that, I can do, I cannot do. We have these thoughts all the time. We think about ourselves, who we are in relation to everyone else, what we can do. We constantly compare ourselves to the rest of the world, which deepens our sense of identity. But these are all labeling thoughts. Every thought labels. In fact, what is labeling? It is not our parents saying, oh, this is called table, this is called chair. That's the initial, very coarse activity of learning a language, which is also a type of labeling, and not the type of labeling we talk about here. Labeling happens in every moment. There's always a conceptual mind interpreting the world for us. There are appearances and the thought, tree, house, car, oh, my friend is coming. Oh, I look better than my friend. Or I'm taller than my friend, right? Comparing ourselves. Oh, my friend didn't do as well in the exam. I did. So in relation to the world, I have thoughts about myself. And every time I do, I label my identity. I basically reinforce my sense of identity, which is just labeled. Always on the basis of something other than being tall, for instance, right? On the basis of certain body parts, I label I'm tall. Or on the basis of taking an exam that I was successful in, I'm good in my studies. And that way, we continuously make sense of the things around us and relabel. Okay. Having said this, it's very hard to think that this world, the way it appears to us objectively out there, depends on my thoughts. But let's check it again. What is reality? What is human reality?
It could be the interference for the mic. The mic. Hello? Is it still on? I off it. Yeah.
What is human reality other than the sum of everything that appears to every human being? Everything that appears to every human being. Because we've already heard, of course, the scientific view on light waves for colors, pressure waves for sounds, that what appears to our mind doesn't exist out there. Plus, of course, the fact that it is through our karma that things appear to us in a certain way. Okay, so taking all that into consideration, therefore, our appearances to the mind are very subjective, and based on these appearances, we create categories, we classify things. We make sense of the world around us, we label it. I mentioned already nominalism. In mathematics, for instance, did you get the YouTube video? Did you find the video? Do numbers exist? No? Not yet. Okay, never mind. Okay, so, but nominalism doesn't just apply to mathematics. It's philosophically a system that has existed for some time in Western philosophy, for instance. But it's not exactly what Buddhism says about things being merely labeled. It does talk about things being, for instance, a species of someone. It's like a rough categorization of certain similarities that living beings have. On the basis of that, we call them animals or mammals or dogs. You know, every dog is uniquely different and still we call them dogs. Every table is different from every other table. But because of certain characteristics, rough characteristics, we apply the word table to them. But actually the table, being a table of this particular object is different from the table of this particular object. The atoms it's made of are different atoms. It's different. It's in no way identical. It's completely different, actually. So in that way, we apply terminology. Nominalists would say that same thing, that it's just a rough kind of way of making sense of the world around us. That's exactly what the Buddhists say. The problem for nominalists is that they don't believe there are any abstracts, like just table, right? From a Buddhist point of view, it's merely labeled, no problem. You can apply the abstract of table, one with table, the isolate of table. If you're Geshe Damdu's student, you know that term. Yeah. Okay. So it's a very important term we use a lot when we study philosophy, the isolate of table. One with table. That's very abstract. but it's still labeled on the basis of the table. It's not like floating in sky. So the nominalists, the Western nominalists, don't go as far as the Buddhists, saying even abstracts are possible, like pi, the mathematical number pi, right? Well, it's labeled on the basis of a circle, right? It's on the basis of a circle. We can label pi. It's functional. It exists. Anyway, therefore, in being phenomena being merely labeled, our mind, on the basis of the appearances to the mind, categorizes now. This is this, this is that. And labels are applied to it. We make sense of the world. But due to our grasping, our self-grasping, our rude misconception of reality, we now believe that these categories exist from the side of the object. That is, table is a table from the side of the object, which is why we call it a table, not the other way around. Okay? But there's so many scientific phenomena in modern science that support the idea that our thoughts actually create our reality. Does everyone know the placebo effect? Nocebo and placebo. Are you aware of this? The placebo effect is when you take, let's say, an M&M, and you believe it's a painkiller. It's through the power of our thoughts that in some people, probably not everyone, but quite a few people, there's been neuroimaging. So in neuroscience, they perform neuroimaging that proves that those people who, through the power of thoughts, through their thoughts, so they actually experience a pain release. And there's a physiological change in their brain that aligns with the change of a person who's actually taking a painkiller and not an M&M. Does everyone know what M&M is? The sweets, these little sweets, M&M. No, it's ridiculous. That's the first thing that came to mind. Or some pill that doesn't have the active ingredients of a painkiller, but that looks like a painkiller. So through the power of the thought, our brain is changed. There's actually the experience of pain, of a pain release. And nocebo is when you take, let's say, again, an M&M, you swallow it so you don't chew it, because that the chocolate becomes obvious in the center. So you chew, and you believe it's got side effects. Oh, this is a painkiller. It's got side effects. Side effects cause me to have diarrhea, for instance. And people experience diarrhea, although they eat an M&M, they don't. So the power of our thought, placebo or nocebo, where you undergo the changes. The person really has diarrhea, and the changes in the brain, they accord with someone who has actually taken a pill and experiences the side effects. Isn't that fascinating? How the physiological change is a result of our thoughts. Similarly, for instance, emotional coloring. I talked about it yesterday, but I didn't use that term. Emotional coloring is what I discussed yesterday. When your thoughts affect your sense perception. Strong grief, everything turns gray. So in your mind it's like, life is so sad, life is meaningless, my best friend or my partner just died. And so everything seems dull because of the thought. There's the thought, dull. Versus another emotion, like I said, when you fall in love. And so this pink clouds kind of experience, this period in the very beginning when everything seems perfect. So, life is so wonderful. That thought has an effect on your sense perception. Everything tastes better, everything looks nicer. Similarly, if you're in a good mood and you're really happy, whatever the reason, if you meet someone who looks very seriously at you, you interpret that face as a pleasant face. if you're in a bad mood and you see the same face, you see it as a negative face. We all had that experience, right? So there's so much evidence of that. So that's emotional coloring, where the emotions play a huge part. That's why our negative emotions, such as attachment and anger, they're so important, because they color our reality in such a way that it seems appropriate to kill my enemy. Because through my anger, I perceive that person as harmful, as intrinsically negative, as intrinsically harming me and what is mine, my people. And so they deserve to die. But then there's something else in modern psychology that's called cognitive appraisal, reappraisal, cognitive reappraisal. That's in Buddhism, that's the same, that's analytical meditation. That is a modern term, and I don't think it has developed based on Buddhist ideas. I think it's just modern psychology has come to the conclusion that our emotions play a huge part in our everyday life. Huge part. Positive ones, I mean, they are the driving force of our actions. So now when there are negative kind of emotions, they can be reappraised, they can be adjusted. They can be adjusted to such a degree that we consciously basically change our thoughts and the situation therefore. That is the power. We can actually, because phenomena don't exist inherently, there's no inherent good or bad, it's up to our own thoughts to see the good. That's why you can see good in even negative situations, because it's only in relation to certain aspects that we can perceive good. It's in relation, you remember, I talked about a virtuous action versus a non-virtuous action. It's just in relation to what we want. It's not in and of itself virtuous or non-virtuous. It's always in relation to something. Therefore, any situation, if we have very negative thoughts about something, if we have very negative emotions about something, well, through our cognitive reappraisal, which is really just a type of analysis of the situation, look at it again, but from a slightly different perspective. So, for instance, a traffic jam, it may get you really angry. I don't know about Singapore, I have not really seen an aggressive driver, despite... okay. Oh, they are aggressive. Okay. Oh, in Germany, there's a lot of aggression sometimes, a lot of honking the horn and swearing and shouting. Here I haven't seen it. But okay, it probably exists here as well. So you're in this traffic jam and you're stressed and you're angry. And so it's just a matter of saying, oh, it's a good opportunity to maybe listen to a Dharma teaching, because once I'm in the office I can't do it. Oh, this is a great opportunity, I've got some extra time. I hope that the traffic is a little worse today, so my boss knows there was this whatever bottleneck on a kind of road, so the boss knows and I'm too late and I have time to listen to His Holiness's teachings. Right? Cognitive appraisal. Same situation, but you look at it from a positive perspective. So you see the power of our thoughts. An obnoxious person. We have this tendency, let's get away from the obnoxious people right away. No, let's seek them out. Let's seek them out. I hope there's someone really obnoxious somewhere, right? Seek them out, because who will give us the opportunity to practice patience? Who else will? I'm not going to practice the nice people. Don't give me that opportunity. No, I need them. And we have great teachers like Atisha, for instance, who kept this obnoxious person close to him. He traveled with him all the way to Tibet. Right? Some kind of tea maker or something. Everyone told him, avoid him. And he's thinking, no, he's so precious. You guys are so nice. You're useless. No, he didn't say that. But you're pretty useless when it comes to practicing patience. How am I going to practice patience? How am I going to see where my limitations are? I I can be a very nice person around nice people. But the moment you press my buttons, oops! Right? Yeah. So therefore, any situation is an opportunity to practice. Wow. Well, how much freedom is there in our life suddenly? We don't have to avoid people and situations all the time. We can actually use everything. Make every moment count, make it meaningful. That's the power of thoughts. If it were inherently good or bad, sorry, couldn't do anything. It feels that way. This is inherently bad. This is inherently... It isn't at all. It's what you make it to be. Isn't that precious? Incredibly precious. So thanks to lack of inherent existence. Alright, okay, that part. So every time I try to introduce to you something that accords, I've given you the basics from a Buddhist point of view, but it's helpful to also have a bit of the modern view, and there's so much of it. For years I've been researching this to some degree, and there are thousands of examples. So many examples of the power of our thoughts. So these are just some. And of course there were some negative ones. One little thing that really surprised me a lot is the shoe. Your shoe. Wayne's shoe. The picture of the shoe you showed me yesterday. The pink and white shoe. I thought the dress was great. The shoe's much better. The shoe is much better. Wayne, he showed us, he talked about this. Look up the shoe. Because the dress, it doesn't surprise me. Half of us see some color and half of us or more see the rest. Never mind. But I keep changing. I see a pink shoe, I see a green shoe. I see a pink shoe, I see... last night I looked at it a few times. And then at some point I saw both. Yeah, it's actually pink, but because of the green light it appears. And I was like, what's going on? I tested it today, get it again, before coffee and after coffee. It can change. It's bizarre. Like, how can that actually be? That my state of mind makes me see. Remember when I was in the car, you showed it to me for the first time, and since I'm in the other camp, I'm the gold and white camp. And so Wayne sees the pink shoe, so he asked me, do you see the pink shoe? And I said, what do you see? I said, a pink and white shoe. And he was like, that can't be. You should actually see the green one, because you're on the other... Yeah, because we see it the other way around when we look at the dress. So this is bizarre. Then when I came home, I thought, okay, I look up the picture. Now it's green. And just before going to sleep, I was really tired. And I was going to shut it down, and I look, and now it's pink. That was really bizarre. Maybe check it out. So here, again, how we perceive even the appearances around us. Even the appearances around us can be different at different times. Incredible. And our interpretation, of course, then also is different. Okay. Anyway, so let's go back to page 28. Ultimate truth. So, what did we do yesterday? Yesterday we talked about the meaning of the word conventional truth. Here, conventional, the term, in Sanskrit as well as in Tibetan, actually means that which obscures, referring to the root misconception. So phenomena, conventional truth, are truth from the perspective of that root misconception. Because from the point of view of the ignorance, for instance, that perceives this table to exist inherently, it exists the way it appears, as inherently existent. Right? Okay. So therefore, conventional here means a truth. Conventional truth here, the word conventional has to be explained. A conventional truth is not a truth. It's only a truth from the perspective of ignorance, but it's not a truth because when we perceive exactly, in particular with the direct perceiver, when we perceive the objects around us, the conventional truth, they don't exist the way they appear to us. Our mind is always mistaken with regard to them. This is not the case for emptiness. Emptiness, when it's directly perceived, it appears to our mind the way it exists. That's just how our mind works. You don't make the phenomena responsible for that. That's how our mind works. So now let's look at the meaning of the term ultimate truth. It just happens, it just helps to understand, when we understand the etymology, the meaning of the word, sometimes it can be helpful. The Sanskrit term for the ultimate truth is Paramata Satya, and the Tibetan term is Thundam Demba. So usually these terms in English, there are different translations. There are different English translations, or 29. Yeah, 29. So ultimate truth is one translation. 29 at the very beginning, absolute truth. We call it usually ultimate truth. Sometimes people talk about absolute truth. It's a little tricky, but it works actually. Emptiness is an absolute truth. But absolute doesn't mean independently existent, but still, yeah. Actual truth is another word people use, actual truth. Truth for the supreme meaning. That's here the literal meaning, but that's not, we don't talk like that. Truth for the supreme meaning. Truth that is the supreme object. Okay, that works. So these are all translations that I've come across in different texts. But in general, there are two explanations about the literal meaning of Paramata Satya, or the Tibetan Thundam Demba. According to the first explanations, these terms mean truth for the supreme meaning. The word meaning, actually, meaning is a little bit tricky. Like in Tibetan, that's really what it means in certain contexts, but it's very hard to find a good translation. So anyway, Paramata or Thundam means supreme meaning, and Demba again means truth. But here the supreme meaning refers to the meditative equipoise that directly realizes emptiness. That's called the supreme meaning, Thundam. Thön means meaning actually. It can also mean object, but here meaning, so meditative equipoise is a supreme meaning. It doesn't make sense in English. So weird. But I don't have any alternative word for Thön. Because object is an alternative translation, but that's the second meaning. The second meaning of the word Thundam. So maybe what would be another word? Supreme aspect. Supreme factor, right? Instead of meaning, say supreme factor. Usually it's translated as meaning, but well, the meditative equipoise directly realizing emptiness is meaningful, and to call it meaning is weird. But anyway, okay. So just know it's sometimes hard to find a good word in English, an appropriate term. Maybe factor is better. So here we say that the emptiness of the table, for instance, is the truth for the meditative equipoise directly realizing emptiness. Does that make sense? Because to that mind, the way the emptiness of this table appears, it exists. Right? To the mind that directly realizes the emptiness of the table appears to it the way it exists, as lacking inherent existence. Okay? It doesn't. The emptiness of the table does not appear to that mind as existing inherently. No. The emptiness of this table appears the way it exists. So to that mind, it is a truth. So the supreme meaning, So for example, the emptiness of our body is a truth for the supreme meaning, or the meditative equipoise that directly realizes the emptiness of all phenomena, because to this mind, in the mental continuum of a sentient being, like us as sentient beings, non-Buddhas, the emptiness of our body, as well as the emptiness of all other phenomena, appears as it exists, as something that does not exist inherently. So to that mind, there's no mistaken appearance. This meditative equipoise is a supreme meaning because it directly experiences the ultimate nature of all phenomena and serves as the direct antidote to the obstructions to liberation and the obstructions to Buddhahood, since it irrevocably or permanently eliminates them. So this mind is a supreme mind. It's a supreme factor. Maybe meaning is really too weird on the translation. It's a supreme element, whatever you want to call it. So this mind is supreme mind, basically, because not only does it perceive phenomena as they really are, but also eliminates all that's in the way to becoming liberated. It's like the vacuum cleaner, the Buddhist vacuum cleaner. Okay. Maybe there'll be a Buddhist vacuum cleaner one day called the Meditative Equipoise. Someone opens a business in Singapore. Buy our new Meditative Equipoise. Okay. The obstructions to liberation are ignorance, anger, attachment, and all other afflictions, along with their seed, which is the potential to arise again. So that is the afflictive obstructions, or the obstructions to liberation, are the afflictions and the potential of them to arise. Right now, are you angry? No. Did you eliminate anger? No. What do you still have? The seed of anger, the potential of anger to arise is still with you. That's why anger can still be triggered, but right now you don't have it. So it's important to get rid of that too. And then the obstructions to Buddhahood or to omniscience are the imprints left by the root ignorance and the other afflictions. So the imprints left by our root ignorance, and what do the imprints of the ignorance, what are they responsible for? How do they affect the mind negatively? What happens? The appearance. Okay, inherent existence appears all the time to us because of so there's like a residue left every time we have ignorance. It leaves a residue in the mind, and these imprints therefore cause us, this residue or these imprints cause the appearance of inherent existence. Does anyone know what the imprints of anger do?
Projects enemy.
Pardon?
It projects the appearance of enemy.
That's interesting. What does Lama Tsongkhapa say in his elimination of the intent? He says something about that. Actually, it's very interesting. Project, I like Calvin's interpretation, saying it projects the appearance of an enemy. I'm not sure. Lama Tsongkhapa doesn't mention that. So he gives, in his commentary on the entry into the middle way, Lama Tsongkhapa says, he specifies what the imprints of attachment cause in the mind, and what the imprints of anger cause in the mind. Does anyone know?
Exaggerates the positivity of something.
No. There's no exaggeration in Arhat. And the Arhat still has the imprints, but no longer has anger or attachment. So the Arhat doesn't exaggerate. There's no exaggeration. Yeah. There's no exaggeration, because if there were exaggeration of the negative aspects, there'd be anger. No, you see, the exaggeration is a negative cognitive appraisal, which leads to the cognitive response of anger. You appraise the situation, someone says something to you, you see it as terribly negative, and anger is the emotional response. But that exaggeration is only possible if you hold on to inherent existence. But that mind is gone. There's no longer a holding on to inherent existence, which is why your mind no longer perceives an exaggerated negativity. What could it be? I'm going back to my material of the Precious Garland. I prepared something for a class I'm teaching, and there I wrote it out. I'll find it right away. Okay, anyway. All right. I mean, it's just briefly mentioned in there, and I've explained it more extensively in this handout I prepared. But okay, if I put it together, the imprint of anger leaves behind like a harshness, like using harsh words, like a tendency. It's like a habit to maybe, if an arhat previously had a lot of anger, now they use harsh words, like you idiot or something. I mean, they don't have any anger towards this person. They don't dislike this person. Pardon? Yeah, it's not even anger, but it's this habit of using harsh language, right? Just being harsh. And then the result of the attachment, the imprints of attachment. Does anyone know? Lama Tsongkhapa says jumping around like a monkey, but it's not literally that they all jump, but it's like this restlessness. Like if previously we had a lot of attachment before we became arhats, and this attachment left strong imprints, then even when you become an arhat, it's a little hard to sit still. That's just the habitual tendency. Physically, not mentally. Yeah, mentally they're fully concentrated, but of course the physical comes from the mental. So there must be a certain type of restlessness, but not that your concentration is not there. So there is concentration, but there's like a habitual tendency. It makes sense, doesn't it? So the ignorance, for instance, the main habitual tendency it leaves behind is the appearance of inherent existence, because it's not an emotion as such. It's just a wrong view. So in terms of how the object is perceived, that's the main kind of problem with the wrong view. It perceives its object wrongly. Whereas anger and attachment, they're emotional states, so they don't leave anything behind how the object is perceived, but rather they lead to a certain behavior. Harsh speech or jumping around like a monkey, like a restlessness, if you like. Okay, all right. So anyway, but all of these afflictions, what they do have in common is that they prevent us from becoming enlightened. So despite the habits, the habitual kind of predispositions that they also obstruct the mind. Okay. So therefore, the supreme meaning here is the mind that eliminates all these obstructions, the mind that realizes emptiness directly, and therefore emptiness is a truth for that mind. That's one explanation. According to the second explanation, the literal meaning of Paramatta Satya or Chandamdemba is a truth that is a supreme object. So it is a truth, it exists the way it appears to a direct perceiver, and it's a supreme object. Emptiness is a supreme object, right? Because understanding is because the emptiness of any phenomenon is both a truth and a supreme object. Emptiness of any phenomenon is a supreme object because it's the main object of a meditative equipoise that gradually eliminates the obstructions to liberation and Buddhahood. It's that mind. We all need to generate that mind to remove what's extra. We have everything to become a Buddha. This is an analogy, this is an explanation I'm going to give you now. The analogy that I'm going to use now is also by Geshe Kelsang. So we say we have Buddha nature. We say we have Buddha nature, right? Does that mean we're already Buddhas? No. So when you go to, it's called a food store, a coffee shop, right? You go to a coffee shop, a good coffee shop, and it says they have noodle soup on the menu. Does that mean it's already sitting there in a pot ready for you to eat? That would not be a good coffee shop. When did they make it? Early in the morning. It's like it's been sitting there the whole day. They kept it hot in the microwave or whatever. No, a good one is where they freshly prepare it. So when they say in their menu, we have noodle soup, are they lying? They're lying, actually. There's no noodle soup. Right? No, what does it mean? We have all the ingredients. We have everything here to prepare a good noodle soup for you. That's what it means, right? Buddha nature is the same. You have all the ingredients. You have everything to become a Buddha. You have everything already there. It's not like you need to externally add a little bit peace of mind from your Lama, right? Kind of have some kind of, surgery, so to transfer some peace of mind or peace of brain. No, you already have the mind that can potentially become a Buddha. You just need to remove what's extra. You just need to remove the obstructions. I mean, of course, we are told to develop love and compassion, but that's only because right now our obstructions obstruct them. Our obstructions prevent them from coming to the surface, so we try to kind of strengthen them even before realizing emptiness. Once you realize emptiness, it's not that hard. And of course, once you remove the obstructions, at least the obstructions to liberation, it becomes relatively easy to generate this love that is in the nature of our mind, actually. It's actually part of our mind to experience love and compassion, but it can't come through. And becoming enlightened, liberated or enlightenment is just a state of where you remove what's extra. So I once read, and I'm not 100% sure this is true, but I came across it in two different texts on Sanskrit. You know the word Bud, like Buddha? What does it mean? Awakening. But there's a theory that it's also the root for the word bud, B-U-D, like a flower bud, where everything for the flower to come into existence is already in there, right? The complete flower is inside, but it's obstructed by the thin skin that usually has to break off. And once it breaks off, the flower unfolds. So that's a very interesting idea, right? I really like that idea. How our mind is like this flower bud. What is it that obstructs it? Obstructions to liberation and obstructions to Buddhahood. They're like the skin of the flower bud. Inside you have everything to be a Buddha. So you have Buddha nature, you have blossom nature, right? Like a bud has blossom nature. So remove that, and it can manifest. It can unfold itself. Yeah. So that's really what Buddhahood is like. I think it's important to understand that we have everything. Just as you have all the ingredients to make noodle soup in that good coffee house, coffee shop. Is that what you call it, coffee shop?
Yes.
Yeah, in that coffee shop or in that food store, yeah. So you have all the ingredients there. Therefore, it's not a lie when they say we have noodle soup. I don't know a fancy Chinese way of saying noodle soup, but never mind. So I'll just say noodle soup. And likewise, saying we have Buddha nature is not a lie. We have all the ingredients to become a Buddha. All right. So, emptiness of any phenomenon is a supreme object because it's the main object of the meditative equipoise that gradually eliminates the obstructions to liberation and to Buddhahood. It is a truth, and as we said that before, or non-deceptive, which means not a falsity. That's also a word that's used. It's not deceptive because, as mentioned earlier, it exists in the way it appears to the direct perceiver in the mental continuum of a sentient being. A sentient being's direct perceiver that realizes the emptiness of a phenomenon is a meditative equipoise that directly realizes the emptiness of all phenomena. It realizes the emptiness of all phenomena by way of the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena appearing to it. Right? So the emptiness of any phenomenon appears to this mind. And all these different emptinesses appear as lacking inherent existence. So emptiness, when it's directly perceived by this meditative equipoise, that supreme meaning. Yeah? So any emptiness, all the emptiness appear to it. The emptiness of just emptiness appears. So by definition, therefore, the emptiness of all phenomena appear. And these emptinesses, they all appear as lacking inherent existence. So they appear the way they exist. It realizes the emptiness of all phenomena by way of the lack of inherent existence of all phenomena appearing to this mind. Which is why the inherent existence of all phenomena does not appear to it. Right? It's the emptiness of all phenomena that appears to us, not the inherent existence. Inherent existence doesn't appear to that mind. A phenomenon's inherent existence and a phenomenon's lack of inherent existence are direct contradictions and cannot appear to one mind. So it's impossible that the lack of inherent existence of the emptiness of the table appears, and that the emptiness of the table also appears to exist inherently. Either it appears to exist inherently or it's not inherently existent. Does that make sense? But it appears as not inherently existent. Everything that appears to it appears as empty. Maybe it's a little confusing with this lack of inherent existence and so forth. I know it's a little. If you had it in a kind of illustration, it would probably be easier. So, okay, I'll say it again. Anything that appears to the meditative equipoise is emptiness. Only emptiness appears. But does the emptiness that appears to that mind appear itself as empty? Yeah. It doesn't appear to exist inherently. So to that mind, the emptiness itself appears the way it exists as empty of inherent existence. Which is why emptiness is a truth. Because to this meditative equipoise, to that direct perceiver, even in the continuum of a non-Buddha, a sentient being, every emptiness appears the way it exists, as lacking inherent existence. Right? So in other words, whenever emptiness, when you have a mind that directly realizes emptiness, then to that mind, the emptiness that you directly perceive appears the way it exists, as empty of inherent existence, and not as inherently existent. Go ahead.
What is the object
What is the object?
that you're talking about?
What is the object of the mind that directly realizes emptiness?
Yeah, because you just said that the mind that experiences emptiness,
Yeah.
then only the mind will just experience emptiness. So, what is the object?
Okay, so she's asking, when there is the mind, the meditative equipoise that realizes emptiness, only that appears to it is emptiness. What is the object? Emptiness. That's the object. What's the object of that mind? Directly realizing emptiness? It is emptiness. It's the lack of inherent existence.
It's not dual. It's not.
Yes, non-dual.
It's not subject even.
There's no sense. There's no sense of subject over here and object over there. There's no conventional truth appearing, no inherent existence appearing. Only emptiness appears. Only emptiness is realized. So what's the object? Emptiness. Only emptiness. We don't have that mind right now, so it's a little strange. Yes, please. Do you want to grab the microphone? Yeah. Please switch it on. Switch it on, please. There's a switch somewhere.
It's not on. The mic is not on.
Yeah, now it's on. Yes, please go ahead.
I just want to understand better for the direct
Experience.
valid cognizer
Yes,
apprehending
yes,
an object,
Yes.
be it any object,
yes,
an apprehended object,
yes.
they are necessary emptiness, right?
In this case, yeah, the meditative equipoise that realizes emptiness directly? Yes, absolutely, yes.
Okay, why is it has to be direct valid cognizer or perceiver? What are the differences between perceiver and cognizer?
Okay, valid cognizer, a direct perceiver. Okay, this is just terminology that is a little difficult also to translate. I mean, you have to use the English translation. A valid cognizer, by definition, is a mind that incontrovertibly knows its object. It realizes its object. It knows, right? It doesn't just correctly assume. It doesn't perceive without knowing, but it actually knows its object. But it can know its object conceptually or directly. For instance, if I were to ask you, remember your breakfast this morning. Remember, think of your breakfast this morning. Then your conceptual mind, because your breakfast is not in front of you, remembers your breakfast, but conceptually. It's not a direct perceiver. That is not a direct perceiver, but it's a valid cognizer in that it cognizes its main object. It knows the breakfast. versus the eye consciousness this morning that looked at your breakfast, that was a valid cognizer. It knew your breakfast. It was incontrovertibly understood or realized the object, but it was also a direct perceiver. It was not conceptual. It was a direct experience. Now, for the meditative equipoise directly realizing emptiness, it is a direct perceiver. There's no conceptual. It's not a memory. It's not like in the case of your memory of the breakfast appears, but it's not your actual breakfast. It's just a generic representation of what the breakfast means to you. Now, when you realize emptiness conceptually, you have a generic representation of emptiness appearing to your mind, and through that you know emptiness. But that's not a direct experience. The direct experience means you don't need that generic representation. You experience emptiness directly, which is a mind that knows its object, therefore a valid cognizer, but with the quality of direct experience, direct perception. So it's both a valid cognizer and a direct perceiver. Did I answer your question? Okay, great.
Yeah, I have a question, maybe building up on that.
Yes, please.
What if it's us as human beings?
Yes.
We are alive, we know we're alive because we're breathing,
Mm-hmm.
and there's a lungs, but I don't see my lungs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
How does that come in?
Okay, how do you don't see your lungs, but they still exist?
Yes, because I know I'm alive and I know I'm breathing.
You know you have a lung.
Depend
You
on
have
these organs, but I have not seen my true
Lung.
lungs. I have not seen the organ myself.
you have not seen your lungs. Therefore, without seeing your lungs, have you thought about your lungs? Have you ever given it some thought? Probably.
Yeah.
So you've labeled your lungs. Yeah. So I'm not saying in order for you to label your lungs, you must have seen your lungs. I said that when it comes to the objects that appear to our mind, we make sense of them by labeling them. But I didn't say everything you label you must have perceived yourself. You can just know that human beings have lungs, and thereby take to mind your own lungs, like have a rough sense of what they must look like, and you label lungs. Yeah. So again, when I give you certain examples, such as seeing a car and then labeling car, it's not absolutely necessary that everything you label that you must see as well. Yeah. So it's not that easy with this whole labeling. It takes some time to get used to. What does that really mean? Do you have to do it at a particular time for it to be there at a particular time? No, that's very important. To label at a particular time, we can label, for instance, a star that existed millions of years ago that now we see, but is no longer there. And still we can label it now. Doesn't mean it has to be there now, or it doesn't mean that what we label that it must exist at the same time as we exist. So when we start to limit ourselves to time, we bring in inherent existence. Our labeling becomes inherent labeling when we want it to be at a certain time. It's kind of the classic example. Everyone closes their eyes and there's no one in the room any longer. Because we don't see it and we don't label in that moment. No. That's not what it means. It's one of the most difficult concepts in Buddhism. But you get better at it. It makes more and more sense as you continue. Okay. All right. I hope I answered your question. So anyway, going back to this direct realization of emptiness, therefore there's no disparity between the way in which the ultimate truth of a phenomenon exists and the way in which it appears to the direct perceiver of a sentient being. So we can say with regard to emptiness, it cognizes emptiness, this meditative equipoise. It cognizes emptiness, and at the same time, emptiness directly appears to it, because that meditative equipoise is also a direct perceiver. And the way it appears to it, it accords with the way it exists. Please note that the distinction between whether a phenomenon is a conventional truth or an ultimate truth is made in relation to a sentient being's direct perceiver. A sentient being's direct perceiver. Because to a Buddha's mind, both conventional truth and ultimate truth appear in the way they exist, as lacking inherent existence. So we're not talking about a Buddha's mind. It's all from our perspective. In fact, everything the Buddha teaches is from the perspective of sentient beings, and more specifically from the point of view of human beings. Because he's teaching us and not dogs or other animals, right? So he's not talking about their reality. He's talking about, when he talks about water, he's talking about water as we perceive it, and not some other being. Anyway, therefore, to summarize, a conventional truth is not a truth. Because it is only a truth from the perspective of the root ignorance. It is a falsity from the perspective of a sentient being's direct perceiver, since it does not exist in the way it appears to it. An ultimate truth, on the other hand, is not a falsity, but a truth, because it exists in the way it appears, as lacking inherent existence to the direct perceiver of a sentient being. In summary. Okay. And here again, to summarize it once again, ultimate truth in particular here is a truth for a supreme meaning, meaning here meditative equipoise, because it's a truth for the meditative equipoise that directly realizes emptiness, supreme meaning referring to that equipoise. And so it's because it's a truth for that mind, and that mind is a direct antidote to the obstructions to liberation and Buddhahood. So a supreme meaning. Why is it a truth for a supreme meaning? Because a meditative equipoise is a supreme meaning. It's so supreme because it eliminates the obstructions. And it's a truth for that mind because it exists the way it appears to it. Yeah, so that's what it says in the little box below this on the left side. It is a truth for the meditative equipoise that directly realizes it, because from the perspective of this mind, it exists in the way it appears to it, as lacking inherent existence. Then for the second meaning of ultimate truth, or the second etymological meaning, we usually, in Buddhism, you distinguish between the meaning of the word and the meaning itself. Right? The meaning of the word and the meaning itself. Sometimes they are the same. So in this case, here, they're pretty similar. But can you think of the meaning of a word not being the same, the meaning of each of the literal meaning, let's put it this way, the literal meaning of the word and that which it refers to. Can you think of an example where the literal meaning of the word is not the same as the meaning of the word? Pardon? Trump? I don't know, Trump. Okay, that's a meaning. Okay, that's the name of a person. But can you think of another word that's not a meaning? It's not a word. It's not the name of a person, but it's a name or a term for a phenomenon where the literal meaning does not align with the actual meaning of it.
Mouse.
Mouse? Well, mouse is, okay, there are two meanings of it. No, I'm not talking about like something...
When you said about conventional truth?
Pardon?
When you said conventional...
Yeah, conventional, like conventional objects.
Oh, no, when you say conventional truth, it's like the meaning...
conventional truth.
Literal meaning is truth, but it's not. It's possible.
But it's a truth for a concealer, right? It's a truth for a concealer, but not an actual truth. So if it were to say just truth, you would be right, but we're saying truth for an ignorance. So that's not an example. Pardon? Huh?
Pineapple.
Pineapple.
No pine.
Pineapple. It's not a pine, it's not an apple. That's a good example. Right, pineapple. It's not a pine, it's not an apple. That's actually...
What do you mean like a metaphor?
Well, I'll give you another example that the Tibetans always give. They say there's a Tibetan word, in Tibetan there's a word for lotus, which is lake-born, lake arisen. But not every lotus is lake arisen, it's just called that. It's lake arisen, it's Tokye. Tokye means like born from a lake. But not everything that is has grown from a lake, or grown from a lake is probably a better translation, grown from a lake. But not everything that has grown from a lake is a lotus, and not every lotus is grown from a lake. You can plant it in a pot. So we say, in Tibetan, they say, don't get caught up with the meaning of the words, because it can get confusing. You need to know what it really refers to. Another word is sentient being. In Tibetan, you have a very similar word, which is semtien. Semtien means, sem means mind, and tien means have. That which possesses a mind. That's the literal meaning of a sentient being. But a Buddha is not a sentient being, although he has a mind. So, therefore, the literal meaning of sentient being is a being who has a mind. But a Buddha is a being who has a mind, but it's not a sentient being. So, in some cases, we are told always by our teachers, be careful, don't pay too much attention to the word. Sometimes the word can exactly describe what it means. In the case of the true truth, it's very helpful. Because here the literal meaning of the words reflect what we are meaning with a conventional truth. It's just a truth from the point of view of ignorance, but not in general. That's what conventional truth means. Versus ultimate truth, it's actually a truth for a reliable mind. Okay, so in that sense. But then there are words, other words like sentient being, mind of enlightenment. That's also confusing, mind of enlightenment. The mind of someone who's enlightened. It seems to be saying bodhicitta, which is the English word is mind of enlightenment. In Tibetan you say changchu sem. Changchu means enlightenment. Ki sem means of the mind. So the mind of. So in Tibetan it's just the other way around. So the mind of enlightenment. But it's not the mind of an enlightened being. Again, that can be misleading. So on one hand we're taught, don't get caught up in the literal meaning. On the other hand, we learn about the true truth being special. In that case, it's an exception. This is seen as an exception. This is just a little thing at the side for your study of philosophy. Don't always interpret the meaning of each word. And there's so many. Pineapple is an interesting idea. Yeah, it's like, it's weird. There's some words, the individual syllables mean something very different. Anyway, it's not that important. But then, okay, so again, it's a truth that is the supreme object, and that's the supreme object because it's the main object of the meditative equipoise that directly realizes it, which is the ultimate truth. And because and that mind irrevocably eliminates the obstructions to liberation and Buddhahood. So in other words, here, supreme meaning, sometimes it refers to the meditative equipoise itself, sometimes it refers to its object. Right? I mean, the two meanings. One meaning is the object of that meditative equipoise, and one meaning is it is the truth for that meditative equipoise, and the other meaning is it is the actual object of that meditative equipoise. Both meanings apply here. Chandrakirti says in his clear words, since it is an object and ultimate, it is an ultimate object. Since just that is a truth, it is an ultimate truth. Okay, that supports, in summary, what we said before. Now, having explained to you the literal meaning of these terms, which is a little dry and maybe a little boring, okay, now the relationship, we go back to the actual meaning and what is the relationship between the two? In Buddhism, relationships are very important. I'm not talking about husband-wife relationships. These are not relationships from a Buddhist point of view. I mean, in conventional sense, yes, but there's a special link that some phenomena have. One is a part of the other. One is a universal or a generality of the other. Some being synonymous, they have a special relationship, synonymous phenomena. So relationships are very important. How do phenomena relate to each other? Of course, if there's dependent arising, that principle is very important. How does everything else connect? How does everything connect to everything else? So the relationship between the two truths is extremely important. Especially in the Heart Sutra, you have it. In the Heart Sutra, the relationship is clearly explained. What are the words in the Heart Sutra?
Empty, emptiness.
Form is empty, emptiness is, yeah, exactly. Those describe. Okay. So the Buddha taught that all phenomena have two natures, two entities, conventional truth and ultimate truth. So all phenomena are inseparably linked to these two truths. Not only does everything that exists is either one of the two, but even if it's one of the two, it's still connected to the other. While phenomena do not have inherently existent natures, all phenomena must have natures in order to exist. This is also a very important term in Buddhist philosophy, a nature. But we're not talking about the nature out there. Oh, beautiful nature in this garden, beautiful trees and so forth. No, the nature means something else. They're of the same nature. What is another way of describing that? I'm so used to this. For years I've been there of one nature. I'm so used to this idea, but is anyone who has a different way of explaining it, like an everyday way of life, one nature? They have a similar nature. They have the same nature. What does that refer to? Kind of the character, right? Like a characteristic, like a nature in the sense of some entity. They have the same entity. Yeah. This is a little difficult initially, but then it makes sense. So let's look at this. It's a little abstract, but not too hard. So nothing has an inherently existent nature, but all phenomena must have natures, must have characteristics, attributes to exist. Therefore, a single phenomenon, let's take the sprout, for instance, the sprout that rises from the seed, has a conventional and an ultimate nature. Nagarjuna says in his commentary on the awakening mind, just as sweetness is the nature of molasses. Yeah, so that's a characteristic of molasses. It's in the nature of molasses to be sweet. And heat, the nature of fire. So conventionally we say it's the nature of fire. Likewise, it is accepted that emptiness is the nature of all phenomena. So here characteristic works really well. Every phenomenon has its own emptiness, its own lack of inherent existence. However, this does not mean that the sprout or the table or anything else is both truth. For example, that it's a conventional truth from the point of view of an ordinary person and an ultimate truth from the point of view of an Arya, a person who directly realizes emptiness. That would be absurd. Some people may believe that from one perspective it's the ultimate truth, from another it's a conventional truth. That's not true. Does that make sense? You can't say a table, from one perspective the table is a conventional truth, from another perspective it is an ultimate truth. That doesn't make sense, right? Is that clear? So Lama Tsongkhapa says this in his text Illumination of the Intent. He says, this indicates that when differentiated there are two natures even in the case of a single entity such as a sprout. A conventional one and an ultimate one. It certainly does not indicate that one and the same entity, the single sprout, for example, is one truth or the other, so either conventional or an ultimate truth, depending on whether the point of view is that of an ordinary person or Aryas. Right? Someone may have that view, it maybe came up at the time of Lama Tsongkhapa, that someone thought, if all phenomena have two natures, ultimate truth, an ultimate nature, and a conventional nature. So from one perspective, everything that you see is an ultimate truth, and the same object is also a conventional truth. It just depends on who looks at it. No. That would be wrong. Because although everything has two natures, there's not a single thing that is an ultimate truth and a conventional truth at the same time. That would be possible. An ultimate truth is always emptiness, and a conventional truth is always everything else that is not an emptiness. I mean, it's always something that is other than emptiness. Does that make sense? Okay. The sprout has the nature of a conventional truth because it is a conventional truth. Right? It is a conventional. I'm a human being. I have the nature of being a human being. Because being a human being, that's my nature. The sprout also has the nature of an ultimate truth because it does not exist in and of itself or inherently, and its emptiness or ultimate truth is a characteristic of the sprout. So in that way we can say any object, this cup is an conventional truth, so it has this nature of being a conventional truth, but since it lacks inherent existence, it has its own emptiness, it also has the nature of an ultimate truth. It has a characteristic which is its own emptiness. That is its ultimate truth. Right? Okay. So the true truth are one nature, but they're not one. They're not the same. So the emptiness of this cup is its ultimate truth, and the cup itself is a conventional truth. These two are one nature. To be of one nature means one cannot exist without the other. You can't have a cup without the emptiness of the cup, and you can't have the emptiness of the cup without a cup. So these are inseparably linked. They are one nature in that you cannot have one without the other. Me and Wayne, for instance, are not of one nature because he can exist without me, I can exist without him. All of us individually are of different natures because one of us can die and the other can survive. So we are dependent on each other, but it doesn't mean we are of one nature. So there's a difference here. To be of one nature means if two things are of one nature, then one cannot exist without the other. My impermanence and me, I'm of one nature. I couldn't exist without my impermanence. It would be impossible if I weren't impermanent. Okay, so that's a very important idea. So these two truths, they're not one because they're not identical, but different and distinct phenomena. This is very much philosophy. So it's a little abstract for those who hear it maybe for the first time, but trust me, it's so important. If you want to pursue Buddhist philosophy, that's something you need to know. And it's not as hard as it may sound the first time, which probably most of you have heard it before anyway. The fact that the two truths are different phenomena but of one nature refers to the true truth in terms of a particular phenomenon. Does not mean that every conventional truth and each ultimate truth are of the same nature. That would be absurd. Not every conventional truth. So I'm not saying that the emptiness of this cup, which is an ultimate truth, and the conventional truth, this table, are of one nature. This table can exist without the emptiness of this cup, and this cup can exist without the emptiness of this table. It would be absurd that each conventional truth is of one nature with each ultimate truth. That would be totally absurd. When we say the two truths are of one nature, we mean in relation to a specific phenomenon. So the emptiness of this cup and the cup, they are of one nature. For example, the I is a conventional truth, and since the I, my I, or your I, does not inherently exist, its emptiness is the ultimate truth of the I. The ultimate truth of the I is a characteristic or attribute of the I, but the I being a conventional truth. And the I could not exist if it were not empty of inherent existence, and the ultimate truth of the I could not exist if the I did not exist, so the two are of one nature. And just as the I and its impermanence are of one nature, so too the I and its ultimate truth are of one nature. Right? This means that the conventional truth, the I, and the ultimate truth, the emptiness of the I, are different phenomena. So the I itself, as a conventional truth, and its emptiness, its ultimate truth, are different phenomena, but of one nature. The same is true of any other phenomenon. Its true truth exists simultaneously and are inseparable. They are one nature, even though they are different phenomena. This is considered to be very important in that when you realize emptiness, initially, you see this two as separate. There's the table over there, and there's its emptiness. It's very simple. You see, like when you realize emptiness, when you don't find the self, let's go back to the practical aspect. You're focusing on yourself, the self that is always in the center of all your thoughts. It's always present somehow, right? is that which controls our life, the sense of an I. If we analyze that and we don't find it, when you come to the conclusion, I can't find it, then there's non-findability of the I. That's all that appears to your mind. The I cannot appear. The I cannot appear to you in that moment, because what appears to you is the non-inherent existence of the I. And if the I were to appear, it would appear to exist inherently. And to one mind, it's impossible that the I appears inherently and not inherently. That doesn't happen. So when you know, when your mind perceives, conceptually, yes, but still perceives the non-inherent existence, that the I doesn't exist inherently. When it perceives that, then the I appearing as inherent existent is impossible. So the I cannot appear to you. It's only the lack of inherent existence of the I. And only when you stop thinking of this non-inherent existence, you think of the I again, at that time you can't take to mind the lack of inherent existence of the I. It's impossible. So they seem very separate. Different minds perceive them, so here's the I, here's its emptiness. That's how it appears, because we can't take them to mind together. In the beginning, and not just that, well, as sentient beings, you can never do that. It's only one or the other. Either you perceive, for instance, yourself, the conventional I, or you perceive the emptiness of the mind. Never both together. That's important. But still, they're inseparably linked. And so to avoid this wrong view that myself is one thing and its emptiness is something else, that's why it's important to understand, no, they're one nature, they're inseparably linked. Unfortunately, our mind, because of our obstructions, is right now not able to perceive them. Only when the obstructions are gone can we know the true truth simultaneously. That's very important. Oh, finished today's material. Okay, so just as the I and its impermanence are one nature, so to the I and its ultimate nature are one nature. So the ultimate truth of the I and the I itself, they are one nature. This means that although they are different, the I and its emptiness, but they are one nature. The same is true of any phenomenon. The true truth exists simultaneously and inseparable. Yeah. So again, here the I or self has two natures: conventional truth, because the I is a conventional truth, and ultimate truth, because its lack of inherent existence is its characteristic. And then below it says that they two are of one nature because they're inseparably linked. Okay. So with this, we again finished an important part. We still go through the relationship a little bit tomorrow. And I explain these four aspects of the Heart Sutra. These are really the essence, they're the heart of the Heart Sutra. The heart of the Heart Sutra. So to quickly go through them, that's not that difficult, but what comes afterwards, that's difficult. Existing conventionally versus conventional truth. This is a little confusing. And there are three characteristics that Lama Tsongkhapa describes for phenomena to exist. That is an important concept, and I decided to include this in the explanation of the true truth. So I will go through it, if not tomorrow, the day after we start with it. And then at the very end, there's an interesting topic, also as part of the true truth, which is always discussed when you study Madhyamaka, actually as part of the explanation of the true truth. It follows at some point. Well, what is it like when you no longer have ignorance? When you no longer have ignorance, then it's like a table is no longer a truth for your ignorance. So is it a truth or not? What is it then? So that is explained later on. For a bodhisattva who has eliminated all afflictions, who has eliminated the root ignorance, that concealer ignorance, when that is gone, is it still a truth for his or her concealer? How has it changed? So that needs to be analyzed, as usually analyzed, and it gives you a better sense of what happens when you have actually removed the afflictions, that is the root misconception. And then we're through it. But I will, again, like I said before, remind you again and again, emptiness, dependent arising, being merely labeled, and I try to present you more examples of how we see our reality based on being merely labeled. This is a question to you, how does racism develop? How does racism is very much on the basis of what we learned, racism is possible. And what is racism? In terms of labeling and then misperception taking place, stereotypes, right? Because racism is just like a stereotype. How does that come about? Is there something, the way in which you could explain this? Now, your homework. Before I forget, did you do the meditations? Did some of you do the meditations on the true truth? It'd be very helpful if you did, because if you do, that just deepens your understanding. Now, for today, I would like you to do the relationship, to focus on the relationship between the true truth. Think of your own self and think of your I, as in again, do the meditation if you can, the non-findability, go through it, then focus on the fact that there's this ultimate truth, which is the lack of inherent existence of the I, that non-findability, try to bring it to mind, and then focus on the I that, on the other hand, does exist, being merely labeled. So you look at it from these two perspectives, as a conventional truth that is merely labeled, and you look at it from the point of view of its own ultimate truth, the non-findability of an inherently existent I, right? So look at these two aspects and focus on the fact that although they appear separately, when we think of one, for instance, when we think of the I, the conventional I itself, the lack of inherent existence of the I cannot appear to the mind, cannot be taken to mind, and vice versa. And remember that they're still inseparably linked. You can't have one without the other. In fact, even the emptiness of the I is just labeled independence on the I itself. So maybe you could even take it to this fact that the merely labeled emptiness, that was the original question we had at the beginning of class, the merely labeled emptiness in the sense that independence on the object based on which we call it emptiness, so in the case of the table or the I, we say it's dependent on the I to be the emptiness of the I. To reflect on that, on the fact that even emptiness itself is merely labeled, but that this merely labeled or conventional emptiness and the conventional I are of one nature, have this relationship. So it's very abstract and difficult at first, but when you think about it, it isn't that difficult. So try as much as you can, and in that way, hopefully it deepens your understanding. And if you have any question, tomorrow we start again with questions. Okay? Great. So all that remains to do is to dedicate whatever virtue we've accumulated today as a group, which makes it more powerful. May all this positive potential not be wasted in a meaningless way, but instead become a powerful cause for all of us to truly understand the true truth. And based on that, develop the meditative active voice, directly realizing the ultimate truth. Eliminate all the obstructions, and for the benefit of all sentient beings, reach the awakened state of Buddha. So with this in mind, let's recite the dedication prayer. Chanchu Sencho Rinpoche, Ake Panam Kikyoshi, Kipanyam Pamepaya, Gome Vondu Pewa.